you send the YouTube link?
Yeah. Hello. Wait, we have our countdown. Okay. Oh, look. Welcome. Welcome to Design Career Network's Get the UX Job, our new YouTube series by Design Career Network, Cascade SF Parent. Let's try that again. Welcome to Get the UX Job on YouTube by the Design Career Network, Cascade SF's parent company. Each show will teach you career guidance and tips on how to land your dream UX job. We'll include interviewing tips, portfolio reviews, career guidance, and more from experts in technology who actually work in the industry and they want to help you succeed. This show is for designers of all levels, from entry-level product designers to managers to students to people who are just looking to find a new career. This is for you. And for our first episode, we'll bring on our dear friend Dan Shilov from Instacart. Dan will give a talk about how to assess the company that you might end up working for, to look at their manager and also the culture and find out if it's the right fit for you. And he'll go over things to consider for your next gig, such as the company's design maturity, your future team, the types of products, the industry, and other essential characteristics. After this talk, you'll come away with practical lessons for how to customize and apply this framework for your needs, whether you're looking for new work or just trying to get the most out of your current role. Now, all talks are free and will be recorded, and you can watch them later on YouTube, our new YouTube channel, youtube.com Design Career Network, which you're currently watching it on, or maybe Facebook. Go ahead and comment, and we're happy to see you comment. We're happy to see audience participation. And I'll introduce Dan Shilov. Here we go. Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing great. Now that we're all set up, this is the first broadcast from Design Career Network, and you've been a member of Cascade SF, which is our local design community in San Francisco for quite some time now. So I'm so glad to have you as a speaker today. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and let Dan take it from here.
All right, let's do it.
Hide myself.
Perfect. All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. Like I said, it's an honor to be here. And as Andy has mentioned, today I'm going to talk about how you can make the most out of your job search in order to land a great role that accelerates your career. So with that said, let's get into it. So as Andy has mentioned, this talk is useful for all kinds of creatives, whether you're in UX and product design, but also if you're working in research and content. And while this talk is for folks who are actively looking for work, if you already are happily employed in your current role, the frameworks and the patterns that I'll share tonight will be useful to assess how your existing job stacks up with your needs. And lastly, this talk is also geared for folks at all levels. So even if you are a super senior staff principal designer, know that you too can benefit from some of the lessons here. So a little bit about myself. Hi, I'm Dan, and I'm part of this fabulous design team here at Instacart. And here's me. And part of the reason I'm here to talk to you is because, like probably many of you, I've applied to many design jobs and interviewed just at a lot of places. And I also had the privilege of being on the other side. So over my last 10 years, I've conducted over 100 of interviews, talking with folks across different disciplines. So sometimes even interviewing up to 5 candidates a week. And I would say to do well in an interview, to really get the job that you want, it helps sometimes to step back and ask yourself, what is it that you truly want? What does your dream job really look like? And I want to offer a couple of like high level things to consider for you, as well as some of the specifics. So to start off, our industry is moving fast, we're evolving quickly, and learning skills is always key. So it's not a surprise that professional growth should be part of your plan. But I also want to say that growth is something very individual for every designer. And even then, the things that you want to learn will change over time. So it's important to know what skills are important for you to learn now. And this brings me to my next point, which is fit. Again, it's also something that's very personal, and sometimes it's really hard to get right. But I'll offer a couple of suggestions on how we can discover if a place really has a good fit with you. And why is this? Why is fit important? Look, we spend more time on our job than we do with our loved ones. If you just take the average work day and the average work week of about 40 hours a week, and maybe factor in a 2-week vacation, that's roughly 2,000 hours in a year that we spend with folks. And you want to find the right place. You want to spend it with the right people, people who energize you as opposed to draining you. And lastly, and I think this is something we actually don't talk as much in design, but I would say support is also just as important. So designers sometimes are often left to their own devices. And in so many ways, when it comes to either learning design, interviewing for design roles, and even performing well on the job. This is especially true for somebody who's new or who's trying to break into the field. But I will also mention that this applies to folks who have experience and who have that knowledge. It still helps to have support from your team, from your manager. Somebody can help you elevate and grow faster and minimize the setbacks and level up quickly. So this is all fine and good, but how do we translate these lofty goals into something that's a little bit more concrete? So with that said, let's start. And let's start with the end in mind. Now, if we think about the job search in general, it looks something similar to this. Basically, you're prompted to look for a gig, and then sort of step by step, you eventually arrive at the end, the offer letter, right? The reality is a little bit messy. It's less of a linear sequence. Sometimes you have to go back and retrace your steps. Sometimes there's radio silence for days on end. And then suddenly you have 3 companies requesting an interview with you ASAP. And so how do we truly know if we're done with our search? Sometimes you find yourself in this murky territory. Maybe a company reaches out to you and you start interviewing, but then realize, it's not exactly what you want, but the salary looks great. So what do? Should you continue looking? What if you're unemployed? Should you just bite the bullet and take the job? And I think this is where it helps to define the final state of your job search. So here are a few ways you can do this. One thing I recommend, and a simple approach you can take, is to kind of flip that model around. And instead of looking for job descriptions, try to write a job description for yourself. And the benefit of that is that will help you establish a little bit of a benchmark. So it will give you a sense of what a great role looks like, and also help you narrow down your search and move quicker and with intention. And if we want to get a little bit more specific with this, here are a couple of things I recommend. So, if it helps to get into specifics of like the company's design maturity, thinking about things like culture, traits of your future manager, whether your new job, whether you want to work in-house or at an agency, maybe you're more excited about consumer, or your enterprise, maybe you're more excited about enterprise challenges, or maybe there's like types of specific devices that you're really interested in working. Maybe also your living location, that's something else that kind of like comes to mind. As well as like if you want to specialize in specific industries and maybe even think about impact, ethics, and diversity. So there's a bunch of things to consider here for sure. And for the purpose of today, I'll go over the top 3 categories in depth because I consider these to be probably the most crucial and the most relevant to most folks here. So let's begin with design maturity. And this first characteristics is probably not too surprising. And as I mentioned, I think it correlates very well with growth and the type of growth that you want as a designer. So what exactly does that mean? So depending on the place that you interview with or the company that you might be talking to, they all have different spectrums of maturity. And what this means is it's not necessarily a good or bad thing, it's just different. Basically, every type of maturity offers different challenges. So for instance, places that are a little bit lower in their design maturity model, what this means, the challenge there is you'll be building the process, establishing a team, helping your cross-functional partners to realize the benefits of design. And it's a great role for somebody maybe who's a little bit senior in their career and who wants the kind of like management responsibility and is interested in the process side of things for design. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, in the high design maturity company, as an individual contributor, you'll be doing more of design work. You'll be focusing on the experience itself, really sort of like pushing the pixels. And when it comes to assessing maturity and understanding exactly where the company is at in the spectrum, there are multiple definitions of it. But I think the most important subcategories to consider when you are actually interviewing or talking with folks is to look into how their team is structured, what kind of processes they have in place, and also maybe their career growth. Remember how we talked about this in the framework of an opportunity. So when it comes to getting a little bit specific, when you're really trying to understand just like what is this company's design maturity and where's that at, there's a number of things you can do here. But the best method is that I really recommend is down below, which is setting up those informational interviews. And this is useful more for more than just design maturity, as it will really help you understand how design is done at that company. And what if sometimes you encounter this situation, right? You've done the homework, maybe you've asked all the right questions, and maybe you even kind of determined that you want to go to a company that has all these processes established, but maybe you just get offers from places that don't necessarily have a lot of design in place. So what if you end up in that kind of situation? And this brings me to my next point, which is culture. Now, when I think about culture, it's also something that helps us determine if it's the right place for us. Is it something that resonates with you in terms of fit? And to get the obvious out of the way, culture isn't about colorful ping pong tables or splashy company retreats. Rather, it's about how things are done at a company. It's its values, what its beliefs. And now back to that question of how do we assess if a low design mature company is still a good fit for you based on its culture? And I would say the most important thing, or like the most important factor to really consider and look for, is their openness to change. And so the analogy I like to provide here is kind of like that of a ship. If the culture is very resistant, maybe there's a lot of folks that you need to convince about the value of design. Sometimes it might feel like you're turning around this huge cargo ship. It feels slow. It feels bureaucratic. And on the other hand, in a company that's a little bit more open, trying new things out, maybe a startup, maybe fewer stakeholders to convince, design maturity can be increased very quickly. As you can imagine, turning a sailboat in a very different direction. It's a lot faster. So yeah, it's a combination of people, but it's also the combination of how open people are to new ideas, such as trying out some of the new things with design. And if you're kind of really trying to get at that question of culture, like what are the right questions to ask? And I would say, in this case, it doesn't really help to ask something generic like this, but instead it helps us to think a little bit more concrete. Think like a researcher. And what that means is get specific, consider the questions that you might want to ask them about their team structure and organization. And think about this as as if you're doing this research study. You're putting this moderator guide together, you're writing down everything that you want to know about, and you're really thinking kind of like very thoroughly about the questions that you want to ask, so that the type of questions that you do end up asking, you ask them with confidence, and you really truly get at the heart of the matter. As I mentioned previously, I'm a huge fan of informational interviews. And I would say they are a low-key method and just a low-pressure method of getting information. So if you have the time, I definitely recommend this as the primary way to go. And as I'm kind of mentioning here, there's a number of folks that you can talk with, whether it's current employees, the hiring manager, maybe even especially former employees. They all kind of like have different pros and cons, I would say. But if you do have the time, if you have that opportunity to speak to multiple folks and get a clear answer, definitely kind of recommend you trying a couple of these out and seeing how things go. And here's some of the questions that you might be able to ask them. Now, I won't go through all of these. This is meant to be a little bit more of a takeaway, but I do want to highlight like this last question here, which, is there anything you wanted to mention but I didn't ask you about? And this can be very powerful as it opens up the person that you're talking to share some interesting information, which you might have not otherwise considered even asking for. So keep that in mind. And lastly, you should really consider the type of manager that you like to work with. So managers will be responsible for many things, including that support piece, as I mentioned. As the saying goes, people don't quit jobs, they quit managers. And it's not a secret that they'll play a large part and a large role in your job and your career. They'll determine if you're hired, promoted, laid off. They'll determine the types of projects that you work on. And overall, they kind of set the bar in terms of culture. They lead by example. But if we really think about our day-to-day and how this looks, why do I mention them so late? And the reason is that, most of the time, probably 90% of your time will be spent not with the design team, but working within your squad. So you'll be supporting the engineering team. You'll be working very closely with the product manager, maybe another researcher. But you'll kind of be a little bit more on this area on the left, as opposed to spending a lot of time with the design team on the right. And one way you can think about what type of manager you want is based on their background. So maybe if you're really interested in folks who are design managers, you'll probably think about like, well, which apps have they spent their hours staring at? Is it Photoshop? Is it Sketch? Is it Figma? If you're new to design, you might really want to work with somebody who can show you those design ropes, really getting into the nitty gritty of the craft, beyond just like the tools themselves, like really imparting some solid knowledge of how to approach design problems, how to think about process. On the other hand, you might be also hesitant to work with design managers who come from a non-design background. So maybe somebody who, instead of staring at Figma, stares at code all day. And I will say that regardless of their background, the reality is that many of the roles and responsibilities of management itself like really overlap. And once folks do get at that manager level, craft really doesn't figure so much into their responsibilities. It's really kind of like the things that you're seeing here that folks are responsible for, which is either building a design team or building a team in general if it's a smaller company. Think about how to establish certain processes and really kind of working to, I would say, improve cross-collaboration skills across a team, across multiple squads. And that's really kind of like the driver of a manager. The common example out there is managers are multipliers, not just additive to the team. And you might say, okay, well, this is all well and good, but like, what else should I know about? And just to kind of like drive the point home, believe it or not, sometimes excellent individual contributor designers can also be not great managers. It's a very different skill set. So with that said, like, what do you take away from this? Or like, how should you really, what are the qualities that you should look for in the manager? And I would say this one's a little bit tricky. It's not so much of a question that you ask them or you kind of like, really understand how they work based on like what they've done in the past. It's not something that you'll see in their LinkedIn profile. I would say I would actually argue that it's something to do with their personality. And I think this is even more important than their background. So some of the questions I would ask, yourselves when you are kind of talking with this person is like, can you get along with them? Does it feel like they can support you and it feels like they can have your back? And again, this is something that's, something a little bit, I would say, fuzzy and a little bit hard to get. But it is something that you should definitely listen closely to with your gut. So definitely think about the types of ideal characteristics that you would want your manager to have, but also make sure to weigh in on their personality. Because again, ultimately, even though you might not be necessarily working with this person day to day, they will ultimately have a lot of influence. And I think it definitely helps to have a manager who can help you, can support you, and it feels like y'all are on the same page. So this brings me to the end of my talk. And I want to highlight just a couple of tips here, which is, when we think about job search, right? We typically think about this as this thing that happens when you have the job. So you kind of like get the job, and then you do the job, and then maybe you're unhappy with the job, maybe you look for something else, or you try to kind of like change the job that you currently have, and maybe like move into a different position, but still with the same company. And I would argue actually that spending the time looking for the right type of work is just as important, if not even more important, for your career. So I think that time there, the job search, whether it happens on the job or outside of the job, it definitely is something that you want to make it count, because ultimately spending those extra weeks, spending that time will help you kind of determine how you perform the work. And again, you definitely want to end up in a place that's fulfilling, where you're happy. Again, going back to that statistic of 2,000 hours, spending it at least with folks that, it feels like they have your back. So definitely take this time when you are job searching and make it count. And to kind of like make the most out of your search, I would say a lot of it really depends on you and the type of role that you're looking for. So I would say definitely make sure that you make this time count. Take the time to define your ideal role, reach out and set up those informational interviews. Take the time to talk with the hiring manager, maybe previous designers, or maybe just existing designers of the company. They'll definitely be more than happy to provide information for you. And when you're applying, another kind of extra tip here is try to kind of go the extra mile and tailor your application. Now, we didn't really talk about this last part here. Maybe that's another talk. But I would say a customized application with a cover letter will definitely set you apart. You want to kind of go that extra mile, personalize it, really address the things that you're looking for, and not just kind of like generically apply everywhere and hope for the best. So I want to be realistic. Doing all these things, it's not a guaranteed success. But I will argue that doing these things will definitely increase your chances and increase the chances of helping you find a place that's a closer fit for your needs. And now to help you think about through some of these things, I put together this handy template, which you can find at this site here. And you can find this, you'll find this useful in either case, either when you're looking for work, but also maybe if you already have a job and maybe you are happy with certain aspects of it, but maybe you find certain things lacking, as environments do change and companies do change as well. So this is kind of an opportunity to revisit that. Is the job that I currently have, is it still supporting me? Is it still a place that can help me grow? Does it still feel like the right fit? We didn't really talk too much about fit, but some designers, for instance, are more generalists at heart. Others are specialists, and sometimes companies grow up and they need different sides of skills, I would say. And sometimes it's okay to leave a company if you feel like the fit is no longer there. And alternatively, you can also try to find those opportunities within the same company. So this template is useful for that case as well. If this can help you have those productive conversations with your manager to kind of understand what are the things that you're lacking, maybe what are the things that you want to get out of your role more of, and maybe have that productive discussion to help them steer and like find those projects, find those opportunities that can help you get a little bit more of the current role that you have today. And if you enjoyed this talk and want to learn a little bit more about how to look for design roles, how to structure portfolios, and just navigate the different interview types, negotiate offers, check out my recently published book with Holloway. It's called Land Your Dream Design Job. Basically, it covers the design job search process from beginning to end. And I try to kind of put a lot of information in there from initial job searching and kind of defining your job all the way to, as I mentioned, offer negotiation. So definitely take a look at that. And as a special thank you, for the attendees today, there's a little bit of a discount code that you can use to get you a little bit more of some money off from the book. And I want to say a special thank you here to my team at Instacart that has supported me over the years. Big thanks to them. And if you are looking for design or research roles, and maybe you're excited about Instacart's mission, definitely check us out. We're hiring for a lot of roles across the board. For design specifically, we're looking into folks like product designers, content designers, researchers, design managers of varying seniority levels. So take a look at our site at instacart.careers. And this wraps up my talk. So, as some follow-up steps here, I believe Andy will send out a survey so you can kind of give me a little bit of feedback how it went. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about work and how to kind of structure your job search process, check out the site dreamjob.design. And if you're interested in kind of reaching out to me, asking some questions, following up on this talk, feel free to connect with me on Twitter, and I'm more than happy to accommodate. And then that's pretty much it for my talk. So I'll open up for questions.
Okay, and there. Oh, look who's here! And Dan, that was fantastic. Everybody in the chat, let's give it up. Give Dan some claps. Okay, we are gonna do some Q&A, and I'm actually really impressed with the amount of people that showed up during the chat. We had about 40 people throughout the entire presentation, which is pretty good for our first event on YouTube Live. So congrats, Dan, and thank you. And look at all this. All these, yeah. Hi, friends. Okay. I just wanted to ask you a few questions because Dan actually just published a book recently, and I wanted to ask a couple questions relating to that. So let's go ahead and remove. There you go. You got it on the screen already. Okay. So Dan, I'd like to ask you a couple questions about your book, which is, when did you decide that you wanted to write a book?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, I actually wasn't thinking about writing a book at all. I was just thinking of like, is there a way to educate designers and kind of like help folks out in terms of just helping folks put their best foot forward, honestly, when interviewing. So for me, it was like a little bit of a process and approach of getting there. And so initially, the book just sort of like started out as a series of articles on Medium. And the idea there was just like to get it out there and sort of experiment, see like what resonates with folks, what kind of like problems were people having, and trying to address those problems within those articles. And it wasn't until actually earlier last year that I reached out to Holloway, who are just really an amazing publisher and folks to work with. And they do a lot of other great books about tech and just like these super comprehensive guides. And we kind of like struck that conversation around like, is this a good fit, or what should come out of this? And yeah, eventually they decided they kind of like looked at the work on Medium, and we worked together to kind of like take that content, update it, include a lot of new developments, such as like interviewing remotely and just like how do you handle those challenges, which are like very different these days. So that's kind of like how the book came about. I would say like originally I started, if you consider those Medium articles, about almost exactly 2 years ago now. And then in this type of like digital book format, it came to be early on last year.
That's amazing. It's really inspiring because, like, it's like you can write a little bit and write a little bit and write a little bit, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I have enough content for a book. This is amazing. Like, it's so what about that experience surprised you the most?
I would say it's hard to write. No, I mean it's true. I think I think let's see. I'll promote another book here, which is Atomic Habits, and I will say personally, I've always been interested in writing. You know, I feel like it's just a designer thing to do. Everybody kind of has a blog these days out there, and I think honestly, for like a whole decade or many years, I've been putting it off. I think 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I was really gung ho about like writing a bunch of articles, and I only wrote like one in a year. And I think the most difficult part was just like sitting down and writing the thing. And I think like what helped me was just like developing developing those habits and just like blocking out a time to sit down every, I think it was like Thursday night or sometimes on the morning on Saturday and Sunday, and just kind of like writing. I think for me too, it's just like the big part of it is just like the mission. After, as I mentioned, I've been interviewing a lot of folks. I've been kind of like at it from different sides of the table. And for me personally, when I was first interviewing, I just felt sometimes super frustrated that you're not able to get those answers. You don't really know what's going on. So I think like the hard part of writing actually was made a little bit easier, I would say, by just like feeling empowered to give back and support the design community.
That's awesome. You have been a part, well, you've been a part of the Cascade SF design community. For those of you who don't know, but I see quite a few Cascade SF attendees or participants, mentors in the chat room right there. But Cascade SF is a design organization in San Francisco that I started a while back. And it's been interesting because since the pandemic, we went virtual with the events, and I realized that I needed to do something bigger than San Francisco, which is kind of like how the Design Career Network was created. But beyond that, the whole point of me bringing Cascade SF into that was because Dan, you've been attending the events for like 4 years and always like very, very passionate about learning and continuously like growing and educating yourself and like, wanting to find like new ways to make your career like more fun and easier for you and also for others. And then you've also mentored a couple times for us as well. And I remember like some of the mentors have actually reached out to me and were like, "Oh my gosh, he helped me out so much." So that's really awesome. It's just so great. And then you published this book. And what do you think about did you learn a lot when you were writing the book about landing a dream job or finding your dream company to work for?
Yeah, totally. I think I would say the biggest learning just kind of came from, as I mentioned previously, just like writing those articles and seeing kind of like what resonates from folks, whether it's just getting those claps on Medium, or getting those comments and posting, on Reddit, and that was definitely very brutal. They don't mess around there. But it was great to kind of like get that feedback and see what are the problems that folks are having, how to kind of like write about them, and like what are the issues that I should address. So I definitely kind of like learned a lot in terms of I would say the outline of the book from going through that process and just like getting the work out there. I think initially when I was thinking about this, I just had like this idea that maybe I'll write, maybe like 10 or 12 articles. And I think it ended up evolving to like 30 plus, just like covering all the different sides and the gamuts of that experience.
That's amazing. And okay, and then I think that we want to turn the questions over to our audience. I see a bunch of people here, a bunch of friends, and some new faces, even though you're all just icons right now. Okay, let's talk a little bit about August Browning. Hi, August. Um, okay, so when Dan, do you hire designers at Instacart?
I don't personally hire. I'm not on the hiring manager side of things, but I do sit on a lot of interviews and kind of contribute as an individual, I guess, contributing designer. So that means I think I mentioned like I sit in on interviews around portfolio critiques, kind of like app critiques, the whole thing. And the way we do it is like I think it's pretty similar with other companies. It's like everybody sort of gets their vote and talks about like the strengths of the candidate.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. You still have a big input on whether or not this person will be a good fit for your team or not. Um, well, August wanted to know, what if somebody doesn't have that much experience, but you think that they might be a good fit? What does a level of experience make a difference when you're hiring somebody, or do you hire them based on skill and talent? What are some of the choices that you assess to decide whether or not this person could possibly be a good member of your team?
Totally, yeah. No, I think it's a great question, and I feel like in general, you see a lot of job postings out there that says 5+ or like I don't know 100+ years of Figma sketch experience or something ridiculous like that. But I would say in general, what really matters is truly skill and craft. So, because as you know, like with designers, I think experience or like years of experience is really, I would say, kind of a rule of thumb, I would say. So it's not something that's really clear cut that, if you have 7 years of experience, you're better than the person who has like 5 years of experience. Or even like, the person who might have 2 or 3 years of experience might be better than the person who has like 5 years of experience, depending on where they apply that experience and like what kind of knowledge they have. So I'll definitely say the most important thing is skills. It's craft. It's actually having the ability to like take on complex challenges and like come up with like really unique creative solutions to help the users, the business. But I would say, yeah, definitely, years is just like one part of the formula. The main thing is, I would say, the level of craft, your work. So really kind of like being key on that in terms of the work that you show in your portfolio and making sure that you definitely kind of like reinforce that fact. I think that helps a lot.
Nice. Now, Jenny would like to know, how can I connect with the previous designers at a company I'm interviewing at?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would say definitely LinkedIn is a good source, and just kind of like I think you can specify the search to be something like where they worked in the past, and I actually think if you search for folks just kind of in general at a company, sometimes they show up too in terms of like I guess alumni of the company. So that's kind of like a quick and easy way to discover folks.
It is, but also sometimes LinkedIn, you might have to have a premium feature. You might have to pay a little bit extra to be able to look in more detail to
Hmm.
find out. But definitely LinkedIn is fantastic. But also you can possibly talk to people in your network and see if they know anybody who has worked at that company, or Glassdoor, right? Glassdoor is another. I don't, and but LinkedIn, I agree with you 100%. Now, Greg Cutler. Hello, Greg. What do you, Greg would like to know, what do you consider to be more important, skill level or the ability to communicate clearly?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna give a cop out answer here, which is sort of both. You definitely, look, if you're a great designer, solid craft, but maybe you're either a jerk or maybe you can't really communicate and articulate your design decisions clearly. It's definitely kind of like in your best interest to improve on those skills. But at the same time, like the flip side, if you can communicate very clearly, but just the level, the baseline of craft isn't there, that too kind of like I would say definitely sort of like hurts you. I would say definitely focusing on craft is definitely key for designers. Uh, and I would say, communication is definitely something that we can always learn and improve upon. So I wouldn't say it's like the end of the world if your craft is strong, but maybe you're still a nice person, but you just can't maybe sometimes articulate as clearly. I think those are definitely like easy skills to learn. But I will say it is, if you definitely want to make an impact as a designer, it definitely behooves you to level up on both of these.
Good, great. Yeah, absolutely. And what about for somebody who's a new grad? What kind of things would you suggest to include in a portfolio with somebody who has limited experience?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I'm actually teaching a class right now at University of Maryland, and that's kind of like the questions that we're struggling with always. because a lot of those folks do have some projects and also kind of like struggling with like companies and COVID, and as a result of that, companies aren't really doing a lot of internships these days, which is I think a little bit of a tragedy. But I would say the big thing there, or the things that companies look for, is, I would say, the design realism, if you will. So what I mean by that is getting very crisp in terms of uh, I would say any user research that you've done, any kind of like real world aspects that you can include in your work, whether that was as part of your your courses, your projects, or even if you want to sort of like follow up and do extra work and actually like research or design with people out there, that's totally fine as well. So I think like my general advice is try to kind of like highlight the projects where you've gone through that process. You weren't very rigid about like A, B, C. At first I did research, then I did wireframes, then I did final design. But you can clearly articulate the process. You can clearly show how you were flexible about it, and also like maybe reinforcing the fact that you also did real world aspects of this. So that means like talking to people, researching things, and kind of like iterating and iterating, because let's face it, at the end of the day, in our lives professionally, that's kind of like what we do. There is no end to that, but there's always improvement.
It's great. And I read this on here. There was somebody who asked about Mio Dice 3. Hello, Mio Dice 3. Mio Dice 3 would like to know how you, like, what kind of details do you include when you write out your job description? Do you go into detail about your salary, your pay, your benefits? How detailed do you go?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I guess there's a couple of ways to answer it. First, it's pretty personal. And the template that I provided here is meant to be more, I would say, a jump start. So it's meant to provide some key characteristics that might be interesting to you, and that you should consider. But that said, some of the stuff just might not really apply to you, or you might not be maybe interested in certain aspects, which is like totally fine. I actually purposely left out salary because I think, in general, designers should be paid what they're worth, which means probably the highest salary that you can get. But I think after that question is resolved, it's like a lot of your day ultimately, and your happiness really will be impacted by some of these other things. As I mentioned, it's that idea of fit. And so I think like finding that right fit based on things that you're looking for in a company, or things that you're looking for in terms of maybe your manager, or your next kind of yeah, I guess like your team, design culture. I think those are actually going to be much more important. So again, I guess like the template here is meant to be like more of a jump start. Feel free to incorporate other factors that are sort of like meaningful to you. It could be salary, it could be something else.
Because that's always changing. But yeah, no. Okay. Now, let's see. Bring on the questions, friends. No. For someone with design and managing experience in another field, what do you suggest for them to gain or position themselves for UX role? I'm actually our next week we're gonna have a speaker. Bo is gonna talk about. I'm like, sorry, catching up. We're gonna have a conversation, a presentation about how to transfer industries. So we're gonna have a few different speakers talking about like switching from architecture into user experience, and switching from academia into user experience, and switching from journalism into UX strategy. So, and any other questions or any other scenarios that you all want to learn about, you should let me know, because I can find speakers and help you answer those questions. But we do have Dan here, and I'm going to let him answer this one. So, what how could somebody who doesn't work in UX, who works in a different field, gain experience, but even if it might be relevant to the UX industry?
Yeah, I think there's I guess like the way I usually frame this, or when folks kind of are coming into the or trying to break into the industry, and maybe they are coming at it from a different, I guess, field. It's basically kind of like trying to, one is obviously, yes, still kind of like getting the experience as much as you can, whether it is kind of taking on projects, side projects, internships, et cetera, just to kind of like build that muscle. But two, I think is also, when you are trying to get that work, I would say leaning in on the transferable skills, or things that you already are very well informed of. So, for instance, like one of the persons I talked with, she was a teacher, and she mentioned how a lot of her, I guess, experience translated to like facilitation skills, communication skills, leading workshops, presenting, storytelling. So I think like there's something to be said about things that you can transfer, even if you are sort of like trying to maybe level up some of the skills on the design side of things. And especially like if somebody actually has design experience in the past, I don't think it's necessarily such a big gap. I think then it's just like becomes a matter of like, how do you communicate your story? How do you reinforce the background, and again, those superpowers that you already have that can be applied to this new role, and then sort of like plug in the gaps either through work or like through other things, to make sure like you can do the, I guess, like the craft side of things, if that's something that the role itself is asking for.
Okay. Okay. Did we talk about the job hunting strategies for a senior designer versus a junior?
I don't think we did.
No, I didn't think so either. Okay, all right. I didn't
Ooh,
realize that these showed up on the screen, but this
nice,
is actually pretty cool.
love it.
Um, so, I'm afraid I'm going to pronounce your name incorrectly. Johan, I think. No, wait, you got to give me some feedback and let me know. Anyway, it's good to see you. Thanks for the talk. How do you think that the ideal job hunt strategies for a very senior designer, principal, or staff level differ more for a junior job seeker?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I would say a lot of it really depends on, again, as I mentioned, maybe a combination of like fit and growth. So I think as a junior designer, I remember when I was sort of like starting out and just looking everywhere and applying to a bunch of job boards and not really having much of a strategy. I think even in those instances, it still helps to kind of like step back and think through a little bit of more what you want. And I think that actually the same, I would say, thinking applies to senior designers too. I think ultimately, what I'm trying to get at here is like it's important to be deliberate with your choices, and I think everybody can benefit from that. Now that said, with obviously with junior designers, I think there is this maybe sometimes struggle of finding the roles that accept junior designers. So I would definitely kind of like look for any kind of new grad opportunities, and think about like how can you present yourself in a powerful manner, whether that means, yes, you might not necessarily have those years and years of experience, but what are the superpowers that you bring? What's kind of like unique about you as a designer? What are some transferable skills maybe that you have? So I think definitely a lot of, I'll say the job search, even though you can still be deliberate about it, but I think it's like, how do you really sell yourself, right? So I think those are kind of the things that you can lean on. And then for obviously like for principal or staff, I think for those folks, it's more of finding the right fit. Obviously, if you do have a lot of experience and in some ways the job search is definitely a lot easier, in terms of, or maybe like a lot of recruiters are already reaching out to you. But I think then it just becomes like, what is, we didn't really talk about this here. But like one of the factors that I like to think about is like think about impact, think about the legacy that you want to leave as a designer, ethics. I think those are definitely, and just like fit overall. I think those are probably much more important for a principal designer, or maybe it's an easier way for them to find those things because they have the experience side down.
Absolutely. We have a couple more questions. Time for a few more questions. And Greg, well, even we give you two, but this is a good question. And then Kristen, we'll move on to you. Greg, how do you potentially uncover horrible work environments before you sign on the dotted line.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think yeah, there's multiple ways of going about it. I guess as I mentioned, just kind of like talking to different folks. So especially, I would say previous designers or people who have maybe left the company. I think that's super valuable, and just like trying to like set up an informational interview with them. That's super helpful. You know, I was definitely kind of like in a similar boat when I was interviewing, and what I call this is like sort of like back channeling, trying to understand or like get the information on my future manager. Like, were there any interesting things about him? Was he great? Was he not so great? And really, what I've done then is just like reach out to the people who worked with him in the past, based on like some of the companies that he's been in the past. So I think that's kind of like a great way to just understand the folks that you're working with, if they're good. I think, and yeah, I think just like there's definitely a lot of information that previous employees can give you. And I will say this is kind of important for you too. How do you like set up that interview so that they do provide you the right information? And I think that's like kind of like leaning on that researcher hat, and building that rapport, and making sure that they're comfortable sharing information, which that might not necessarily be positive. So I think definitely try that out. And then I would say, yeah, I think just kind of like setting up those informational interviews in a low key stakes. I think it's like a good way to go.
Very good. Also, finding out well, what are some questions that you would like? What are some examples of horrible work environments? Ones where you don't have control over your schedule because you always are on a deadline, right? What else would be an example of a horrible work environment? Like the way that they communicate to you, for like, are they good communicators? Do they have good ethics and values? And does it feel like people are happy there? Um, like you mentioned, Dan, in your article, not your article, in your talk, you were saying about like what is the culture like. So it's like, I feel like if you like the people and you just kind of talk to them, that could help. But who knows, you might just get hired and you love it, and then they close the door and it's the worst nightmare. Hopefully not. But anyway, we'll move on to Kristen. Kristen would like to know, how do I break into a more permanent position rather than a contract role as a mid senior level UX designer? And Kristen, question, uh, have you worked in a full time role, or only as a contractor? Because I think that might help. Um,
Yeah, I would say I kind of like looking into this,
mhm.
and I've definitely kind of like been in that situation before, where I would just sort of either take on contracting work. For me, taking on contracting work was just like an opportunity to either break into more of a full-time role at that company that I was working with at the time. It was, and I guess like the way it was set up there was, you do this for a couple of months, and then if things work out, we'll hire you full time. Everything's great. And unfortunately, things just didn't seem to be working out with the way the company was going. So I actually just started looking outside of the company, and started looking for like which other places are hiring, what are the companies that are looking for designers, and really kind of like going back and trying to crisply summarize like what are the skills that I can deliver on, and it's like what is really the value that I provide, which it doesn't matter the type of value that I provide as a full-time employee or a contracting position. And at the end, because I was able to kind of like clearly think about those skills and articulate those, I think that really kind of like helped me navigate some of the job search. So just to give you a little bit more specific example, I had in that contracting role, which I had at the time, I initially got another contracting role, and it was with a really great company. And unfortunately, and the way I actually sold myself to that company, it was just showing them off some of the prototypes that I've done. in a really, I would say, data tool called Axure. I don't know if anybody even uses Axure these days. But I was like showing them all the complex prototyping in terms of like different states and yada yada, and it kind of like resonated with folks pretty well. So I think it was just like really this idea or like this superpower prototyping that kind of helped land that job. But ultimately, it just didn't really feel like it was the right fit. So I actually rejected that role and I continued looking. And I was actually going through an event very similar to Cascade, that I then found a role almost circumstantially that also kind of like hit on my strengths, which was like more of a generalist designer, somebody who can dabble a little bit in front end code, but not too much. So again, I think it's just like a matter of like how can you tell your story. I think the contracting part really doesn't matter as much as long as you can kind of communicate the value that you provide and making sure it's a good fit between like the things that the company is looking for and the superpowers that you have. So yeah, that's kind of the some thoughts.
That's consider the culture. Whoops. No, it totally makes sense, and I understand, Kristen, because I've been there as well, and I feel like you'll find the right fit, and you just got to keep applying to places until it feels like okay, this is your home, and you've got it. So, but we also have a question from August Browning, which is many designers end up staying. August noticed that many experienced designers end up staying contractors for the majority of their career. Is there a point where designers get too expensive to hire as an employee?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I was actually talking to one of my recruiter friends about this topic about why is it that there are so many senior folks who are contractors. I think actually it might not necessarily be the case that they want more money or they're too expensive. I think part of it is just like honestly lifestyle and the type of work that they might want to do. And I would say like it's flexibility as well. So I think salary, just remember, it's just one part of the equation, right? Sometimes people do appreciate the freedom that design provides, being able to work remotely, being able to work on multiple different types of problems. And I think that that's kind of like the advantage of it. I mean, obviously, contracting is a challenge in and of itself, but there's also like opportunities to kind of like pick your own companies, your own teams, different projects. So there's definitely kind of, I would say, flexibility that comes with it.
Mhm. Pros and cons. Okay, I think that okay. Hi Dan, if we are just starting out, is it very important to define what UX role we want in order to get a job? What is your advice on our title on LinkedIn if we are not sure yet?
Yeah, I mean, if it's just titles, I mean, I would say, you know, it's, I guess, like the way I think about it is like, what's the most descriptive titles that recruiters can find you by on LinkedIn? So if it's, senior UX product, or I guess if you are starting out, maybe UX product designer is just as fine, as long as you can kind of deliver on those skills. But I think like honestly, titles it's just always so vague. UX designer at one company is a totally different thing, and at another company, product design is also just very different. So definitely kind of like think about in terms of how do you define these terms for yourself? Like what are the things that you bring to the table? And I would probably brand yourself maybe something generically, but then really the crux of this comes at when you are looking at those job descriptions and understanding what are they looking for? Do you have what it takes? Because like everybody's looking for something very different. Some UX designers or like some positions look for UX designers who are like very generalists, can code the site and do the interaction, the visual design, write the copy, et cetera, et cetera. And who knows? And for well, other companies are like very specialized. You're like working on specific part of the company, specific part of the project, maybe keying in on things like that are more heavily on craft, like just visual interaction design, for instance. So definitely kind of like keep that in mind. But I think as far as styles go, it's okay to stay generic and be searchable.
I, I'd like to add to that as well. If you can, I add to that?
Of course.
Okay. All right. So I think I, as like a UX content strategist, whatever. No, not whatever. I am partially a UX content strategist, partially a designer. but and wholly awesome, and so are you. No, but and anyway, I think that you should look at the jobs that you're interested in and see the patterns of how they're their describing the jobs that you're interested in, and also look at the skills that they're listing. Do you have those skills? If you don't, then you can go out and get them and find ways to add that to your resume. But definitely mirror what it is that recruiters are looking for, even though they're not always like exactly word for word. Like somebody might need, they might say a UX designer, but actually be looking for a visual designer. So I actually agree with you, Dan. Like you go in and look and read in the descriptions and see what it is that they want you to be doing. Like, do they want you to be designing logos and doing visual design, or is it like more interaction step by step? And but definitely look at the jobs that are interesting to you and see how they title it, and that's how I would update my resume if I was targeting a specific role. So same thing.
Totally.
Same thing. Okay, and I think, is that it? Yay, Aniruda! Thanks for the shout out. Thanks for the LinkedIn shout out, Dan, from Aniruda. He'll be speaking in a few weeks.
Awesome.
Okay. And I think that's it. Did we answer everybody's questions? Yep. Okay. Awesome. Let me check this off the screen. I didn't This is cool that we can put. Oh, we got one more. We have to while we have you here, may as well.
Sure.
Okay. So, as a freelancer, I'm trying to transition into in-house. Do you have any advice or tips on how to do that? And should I consider an agency job to provide more chances? Good questions.
Yeah, totally. I think in terms of, I guess, transitioning, I think definitely as a freelancer, you have a lot of opportunity and kind of like space to experiment with different types of projects. But if you are looking for something more in-house, I would definitely try to kind of understand, or I guess maybe if you are considering in-house versus agency, for instance, I would try to kind of understand, what are the pros and cons of each, why are you interested in those things? And sometimes when we ask these questions ourselves, we don't really know. So sometimes it helps to, like, again, just talk with folks who already are in-house or who might be at an agency and kind of understand what are the challenges that they're facing, what are the types of skills that they're looking for. And I think like the way you approach this it's almost like the sales game, and you're trying to kind of really understand your clients' needs, and then based on that, sort of like tailoring your portfolio and resume accordingly. Again, I think like the biggest thing is just making sure that you get the right experience. And I think sometimes the whole notion of like the dream job is you have a certain North Star or your ideal in mind. But it's also okay to, like, maybe not, you don't necessarily get to that initially up front. And if you can get there kind of like step by step, whether that means taking on maybe some freelance work for an agency. I mean, that's very common these days, or I guess like even in the past too, kind of like building up those skills and that repertoire. Potentially then maybe taking on a full-time role there, or kind of like selling, like showing the work that you've done for that agency, but maybe talking about that when you are interviewing for in-house companies. So I think like thinking about it from like how can you research and truly understand like what are those agencies and like specific agencies that you're really interested in, what are they looking for, and understanding how can you kind of like get in there step by step, and then yeah, just kind of like I would say making the most out of the work that you already have and kind of connecting the dots for them based on what you have and based on kind of like what they're asking for.
Awesome. 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 I think that was, hold on, wait 1 second. It's kind of a similar type of thing to what Kristen was asking about. So anyway, Dan, thank you. I am so happy that you came on and spoke with us today and also gave us this wonderful presentation and answered all these questions and helped so many people. And the video will be on YouTube. For those of you who are on YouTube adding comments, we also streamed to Facebook as well. So it's all over the internets, but it's at youtube.com/design career network. Yeah, because we are the Design Career Network. And for anybody who wants to get in touch with Dan, you can reach him on Twitter at Dan Shilov. Hold on, I'll put that on the screen for you. Here, I'll just write it on the chat so that way it'll be easier. There you go. Twitter. So there you go. Woohoo! And then also make sure to check out our schedule, our upcoming schedule, which is at oh yeah. We'll make sure that the discount code works. Dan will follow up about that, right?
Yeah, I can. Let's see. Can you do you see my link? I just sent it to you in the chat. Feel free to just post that one.
Oh, is it private chat or okay?
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully that will let folks.
Okay, let's see. I'm posting it in here.
Perfect.
Love the logo for the channel. Thank you. It's out of this world. Thank you. Thanks, Craig. It's been really fun. We actually, so also just to let everybody know, we also have another show that's called Our Digital Future, which I'm working on. It will be well, I interviewed one medical about how they set up their site for COVID response, and also I am digging into eco-friendly design and looking at sustainable jobs and talking with people who work in like newer emerging technologies. So that's another show that I currently have in the works. But this show, get that UX job, will be every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. and some Tuesdays if you're lucky. No, there's plenty. And that's on here. It's go to designcareer.org because that's the only place you're going to learn about design careers these days. No, there's plenty of outlets and plenty of opportunities. Our community is so awesome. Whether you're in, Cascade SF for Design Career Network, or even just like Designers Guild and all, so many awesome communities of designers and people who want to help out. And if you're one of those people who wants to give a talk and share your knowledge about whether it's like an emerging technology or something really cool that you're working on, or maybe even just some career advice on how to answer interview questions properly, or how to prep your portfolio. We're looking for designers to review portfolios and also talk about, like breaking into the industry as well as breaking into management. We have a few different speakers on that, but we're always looking for different angles and ways to present that information. And the best part is, as a content strategist, I work with you one on one, and I can help you craft your presentation and make sure that everything is solid and easy to follow. And I'm happy to do that more than anything, just to get, to help you share your voice. So, whether or not you need that help, I'm here as a resource. So, love you all. This is it. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank
And,
you.
and thank you all for your support. Have a great night and have a wonderful Thursday and a fantastic weekend, because the weekend is coming up. And also be safe and stay healthy. And that's it. Bye bye. High five.
Bye,
Yeah.
everyone.
Bye. Bye bye. All right.